Hey, I just wanted to jump on camera here to answer a few quick questions I got regarding my most recent video. So the two biggest questions I got was, hey, like how do I get started in the industry? Is it difficult? Stuff like that. And then the second question was, oh my God, you did 11 internships? What the literal hell? Why would you do 11 internships? That's ridiculous. So I wanted to address two of those questions now. So basically, the first one of the person who asked was Shorty4 from Reddit, and he or she asked, I wanted to ask, since you mentioned it, is it hard to find a job in the industry? I'm a web developer, but I keep thinking to move to game development, but things like this scare me. And so that's kind of a complicated question. Is it hard to get a job in the games industry? I would say yes and no. So, one thing to understand about the games industry is it's really, really small, and um, it's very weighted towards junior developers. So there aren't a lot of graybeards or senior level programmers in the gaming industry because when, unlike other industries, when people like become really old in the games industry, they often leave to go to other industries where it's easier to work and get higher pay. So kind of the games industry is known for working people a little bit harder than other software firms. The product is just a little bit harder to make than other software products. It's a little bit worse pay, and it is longer hours. And so when you take all that into consideration, really you do have people who are really passionate about the product who stay in, but most people, when they get older, they leave because they find that they can fulfill that joy through some other means. And maybe it's enabling gamers or game developers in tools like Unity and stuff like that. But often people don't stay at like these developers, and certainly not these like first party developers. It's just not as common. It's a little bit hard to stay there. But I wanted to address that point first because the truth is, once you're in the gaming industry, because people are leaving and it's hard to get that really top talent, a senior level engineer can almost always find employment as long as they're not an asshole. So, pretty much every company I've ever worked at, Zynga, Hangar 13 2K Games, Sony Santa Monica for sure, all these companies have a policy where pretty much if you're a senior level engineer, you're like guaranteed to at least get an interview because they are always looking for that top level talent because it's just so hard to find people at that level who are seriously performing at that level. So, in a sense, it is a little bit harder to break in the first time, but once you are in there, if you want to stay in there, there is pretty good security in the sense that there's always someone looking for like a senior level engineer. And again, we are talking about engineers in other fields, like in QA, certainly quality assurance. It's just not as good job security. Like I've read so many articles, right, of like QA just getting dropped after their contracts or whatever. And basically, the situation around that is there's a law in California and some other states where if you keep a contractor for a certain amount of time, you have to pay them benefits or something like that. And so what they do is if it's 1 year, they hire the contractor for like 11 months and 30 and 29 days, and then they fire them, and then they wait the period of like 2 months, and then they hire them again. So because they're doing, they're going around the law, they're basically trying to save money, but it really is like a pain in the ass for these people. So there's a few articles about that. Um, so to answer your question of whether or not it's hard to find a job, it's like, well, once you're in, I do think it's actually pretty easy, especially for those senior level people. And it does sound like you're someone with a little bit more experience. But in terms of breaking in and finding the first job, it can be a little difficult in that sense. And so I do think the gaming industry is a little bit it's it's like its own little sphere, so it can be hard to break into in that sense. And so I did make a guide, and I just wanted to show you. I'll put it on the screen for a second, but this is just a number of opportunities that I found that might be helpful for you. So basically, these are just a few job postings that I found for basically intro level people. And ultimately, if you are trying to find a job at the intro level, I do think it's totally possible. But for most of these people, the reason why they just like they check it out and they totally are not into it is because it's like a huge pay cut. So you're going into a position that might be the same level, or you might have to take a lower job And you do have to be aware of that pay cut, which can in some cases be like 50%, right? So like compared to for what I was making at Facebook versus Sony Santa Monica, both of those are like really high prestigious jobs in their respective industries, but one of them pays literally 2 times as much. So it's just something to consider. Um, and so I hope that answers your question. I'd love to talk more, but if you want resources or additional questions on that, I'd be happy to help. Okay, so now I wanted to answer the second question, which is 12, 11 internships? What the hell? Why would you do 11 internships? And so basically, I might do a longer video on this at some point in the future, but it just stems from the fact that I had a few unique circumstances. So the first thing is, I knew I wanted to be a programmer since I was in middle school. So I started programming professionally in high school. I've had my first internship in middle school. Basically, I went to somebody who was the Boy Scout leader in my Boy Scout troop. Boy Scouts is like a camping organization in the United States. And so basically, I went to him and I said, I'd really love to learn how to code. And he said, okay, well, you could work on this job if you find a buddy. And so I recruited one of my friends who would be willing to do it with me. And so together we like would just practice coding in like this faux or like fake environment of this job, which he made loan software like student loans and housing loans. So it was some pretty boring stuff in Java, but and we didn't do any work that would actually help the company, and he didn't pay us any money. But that was kind of my start. So I started really early, and then I worked for NASA twice. I went to Canada for a week to start my international research program, which I then went on to present in Ireland. And then by the time I had graduated high school, I had already worked maybe 5 or 6 of those internships. So that is a lot of time to be putting in, whereas most people only get their first internship after 2 years of college. So I started about 6 years ahead of those people, and each year I was doing an internship. So that is why it did build up to such a high number of like 11. It seems like a lot, but I did start about half a decade earlier than most people. And then the other aspect of it was it took a long time for me to figure out what I was really passionate about. So as I said, the first programming I did was in loaning software, which is not something I would really even think about doing now. Financial technology as a sector kind of scares me a little bit. So I went from fintech to government research to non-for-profit research. Then I did my first job in video games when I was a freshman in college. I worked at Zynga, which is a mobile game studio, and basically the reason I got that opportunity was because I contacted someone in the Stanford alumni network, and he gave me a good recommendation. And after I had talked with him for a little bit, and that's still someone who's a mentor to this day, Jim. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better perspective of like what my path was like. And to make a long answer short, I started way earlier, and it took me a lot longer. So it took me longer to figure out where I wanted to be because I did jump around a little bit before I figured out, oh my gosh, I really want to make games. I want to make AAA games, and I want to do it in this kind of environment. Where now I have a really strong idea of what I want. Like, I know I want to work in a first-party developer, something like Insomniac or Guerrilla or Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog. And I know I want to be, on a AAA platform. So that is a big difference from where I was 4 years ago, where I was just like, I want to work in the games industry. And then the other big switch, which I haven't hit on, is just, yeah, it took me a long time to figure out what sector of the games industry I wanted to be on, but also what work I wanted to do. So I talked about how just in my last internship, I was thinking about doing some design stuff because I had dabbled with kind of being a programmer and a designer. And that's not really good for your career. It's way better for you to figure out what you want to do early. And if I had known I wanted to be a gameplay engineer from day one, that would have saved me a lot of time. Because now I know with certainty, like, gameplay engineering is 100% my passion, and it's the perfect intersect of design and technology. That's a good fit for me. And finding a good fit for you, that might take years, right? But I'm just really grateful that I was able to do it in an internship environment, which provides you with basically the flexibility to fail, and it's okay because you're just an intern and you're starting out, but also to just try something, and if you don't like it, it's only 3 months. so you can iterate and you could try a new job if it's not a good fit for you. And that was certainly the case for me. I did do internships where I knew within the first month, oh man, this is not a good fit for me. But I put my all into it and I tried to get as much out of it as I could. So, for example, at Tilting Point, I wanted to be making games, and that was a publisher. So instead, I was helping other people make games. And while I did find that really rewarding, I knew from the start it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. But because I put in my all and I did try to get as much out of it as possible, I learned so much about free to play economies and like how to make uh, how to support indies. I learned a lot more about the ecosystem from a business side. That's helped me tremendously in everything else I've been doing. So you never do know what an opportunity is going to present you with. Okay, so those are probably longer answers than anybody wanted to know, but two answers to the questions I've been receiving from my most recent video. And if you do have additional questions, put them in the comments. I'll make another video. I want to help people who are interested in these questions, and I'm just really grateful for all the feedback and support I've gotten. My last video blew up, and I do have a little bit of a parody video coming up, which I think is going to make light of that situation. But in all seriousness, I am tremendously grateful, and I'm just so proud to be sharing everything I learned because um, I love this stuff, man. I love it so much, and the opportunity to share it with others and help empower them on their journey as game developers, novice game developers, junior game developers, people who are experienced developers but just new to the industry. I'm just so happy and proud to be able to share that with people. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, give me a thumbs up, and you'll make me smile. Thank you.